Hey guys, Chicky Domain, Deboo.com with a Deboo.com surf forecast update. This forecast update effective around 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, October 3rd, 2016. And here we go, guys, entering the real-time phase of Hurricane Matthew lifting into the central Bahamas over the next several days. For those tuning in for the first time, we are primarily a maritime and surf forecast. For those visiting for specific information on Hurricane Matthew, please visit the National Hurricane Center at www.hurricane.gov for all official watches and warnings. If official watches and warnings are issued for your area, please heed the advice of your state, local, and county emergency officials. All right, guys, here we go now. Here's what makes this forecast so complicated. For those who follow our forecast, you know we talked about the first hurricane force low in the North Atlantic. We've had that verified now. We now have the second hurricane force low forecast over the next 72 to 96 hours. Area of low pressure moving east of Newfoundland, and it's going to reinvigorate this other hurricane force low that developed the other day. We have another area of low pressure off the mid-Atlantic that's going to slide off towards the east. We have a 98L invest out here in the central Atlantic, has become a little bit better organized overnight. National Hurricane Center giving a 40-40 chance of development, 40% chance of development next 48 hours, 40% chance of development next 5 days. We have Hurricane Matthew down here approaching Jamaica and eastern Cuba. We have a front, upper level trough, and a couple of areas of spin in here. And guys, so there's so many players on the board that it's hard to figure out what the exact outcome may be. Does Matthew come over here? Gets influenced by 98L because 98L, possible Nicole, could become a little stronger and draw Matthew up. The model showed us that last week. At least that kind of track. Or does Matthew come in here a little bit closer to the Florida coast once it's into the Bahamas? Overnight, the models have had a western shift. Doesn't mean by this afternoon that it can't go back to an eastern shift. Whatever you take away from this video, do not take it as gospel, because what we're showing you right now could change in the next 12 hours. Here's the latest forecast track out of the National Hurricane Center. What we want you to note is yesterday the cone of uncertainty was offshore Florida. Now the cone of uncertainty is touching the east coast of Florida. No one can be ruled out at this time, especially beyond 5 days. But here's the National Hurricane Center showing that Matthew will make it into the northern latitude just north of 30 by Saturday. So here it comes. When we take a look at the satellite imagery, if you look right here, you can kind of see like a little hook. You see that? All right, and so we've got 98L in here spinning. That's going to move off this way towards the northwest. Matthew lifting up towards the north. This little hook right here is in the exact location or close proximity to where the National Hurricane Center is saying that the system is going to be on Wednesday. Lifts up into the central Bahamas and stays up here to the central Bahamas. But we want you to take a look at, this is weatherstreet.com. And when we get closer to go time, we always like to look at this to kind of give us some hints and ideas. We're going to progress this little animation, and you'll see coming up in the right-hand portion of your image, here comes Matthew, and notice right here at the end, notice that little dip to the northwest closer to the southwest Florida coast. This is just one possibility, guys. So for those worried about wind and rain into Florida, look at this heavy rain that's in here. And so the flow is like this on the bottom side, and then northeast this way. Folks living along the coast, do your yard checks. There's no ruling out that there could be some tropical storm force winds along the Florida coast. Switch you over to the latest out of the National Ocean Prediction Center, showing hurricane force low developing next 48 to 72 hours up in here in the North Atlantic. Guys, this is the second hurricane force low with a major hurricane in the southwest Atlantic waters. I'm not sure how often that has happened before, but to me that would be very rare. Here's this other area of low pressure moving out of the mid-Atlantic next 48 hours, and at 96, Ocean Prediction Center takes Matthew and turns him to the north. But if you go back and look at the 48 hour, look how this arrow is pointing. It's down here in the bottom, south of Florida. Notice how this arrow is pointing to the northwest. Folks in South Florida, there's an old saying, better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Because of so much uncertainty, guys, prepare yourselves. At least stock up on some water, whatever rationings in case power goes out, at least that. Pray that the center is going to stay offshore, but you also as well could experience tropical storm conditions in here. Can't rule any of that out. Here's the latest 96-hour swell forecast, guys. And the two hurricane force lows that developed up in the North Atlantic has put the majority of the Atlantic under northerly swell. All the way from the North Atlantic, all the way down in here to West Africa. Pull you over here. Here is the front runner from the southern half of Matthew when he begins to lift up. 15 to 18 second southerly periods. Obviously, under 35 to 40 knot winds, surfing conditions probably are not going to be favorable unless you know some secret spots. But let's walk you through the latest 06Z GFS. This is just out now. Here is the remnants of the first hurricane force low. Here is the area of low pressure that's moving just under Newfoundland. Here is Hurricane Matthew. And the difference between the Euro and the GFS has been, here's 98L right in here. The GFS doesn't like it. And in fact, it really kind of doesn't show it, but it's been heavily weighted on a second area of low pressure moving out of the Cape down in here to the Atlantic, and that's what we just showed you in that last forecast map out of the Ocean Prediction Center. Going to put this into motion for you now, so pay close attention. Here's that second area of low pressure that's going to develop in the North Atlantic as the second hurricane force low, and watch how this thing just beautifies and bombifies right in there. Look at that. And that's what's producing that northerly swell in here. Seas likely increasing again to excess 40 feet. That's two systems within a week creating seas in excess of 40 feet in the North Atlantic. Now here comes Matthew lifting up. This is Wednesday, up into the central Bahamas. Off the central Florida coast and into the Outer Banks. Maybe an eye wall touch there. Maybe. Again, this is one run of many models to come. This is not a forecast. But then up along the northeast coast and into Nova Scotia. Back that up for you. GFS keeps the eye off the coast. Doesn't mean that we can't experience, especially in northeast Florida, tropical storm force conditions just off the beach. Obviously, surfers, you know that this image is for Friday, that once the system pulls up on the southern half of the semicircle, we're going to get the offshore winds and the cleanup. Outer Banks, your cleanup would come on Sunday. Prayers to y'all. You were under the greatest threat at the moment, and into New England and into Nova Scotia. And then a return of high pressure and northeast flow in a typical fall pattern. Now, one of the things that we want to point out to you in this, now this is next Tuesday, October 11th. And as you can see, if this GFS verifies, the tail end of Matthew is going to be in here in the Bahamas and starting to tap down into the intertropical convergence zone. And same thing here. You're going to get lift in here. This is when you start to get chances of increase for homegrown activity. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying that the pattern is setting up for that. We have another area of low pressure over here in the eastern Atlantic, west of Portugal. And so large swells, guys, for the next 2 to 3 weeks at all points around the Atlantic basin. Switch you over to last night's run of the euro, and here's where things get interesting. This is last night's run of the euro and the difference of what it wants to do. For those of you saw our post yesterday, we talked about Math-Yoo making the euro, Math-Yoo making an S-turn. Okay, well, here's the S-turn. But it puts it closer to the South Florida coast. This is Friday. This is Saturday. This is Sunday. And brushing the outer banks. Mind you, there's much uncertainty outside of 5 days, but let's look where the euro ends up at 10 days. The euro ends up at 10 days, essentially east of the Florida coast. Guys, we could be talking about Math-Yoo for a long time because the European model is suggesting that a blocking pattern is going to set up and is going to block Math-Yoo right in here, and Math-Yoo could, not saying it's going to, meander for several days. That's all we got for you for now, guys. Stay tuned for the next update.